Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we've got an early impression video on not just a new fragrance, but actually a new fragrance house for me. And anytime I do an early impression or the first time kind of getting to know a new fragrance house, I'm not just exploring the fragrance, I'm also kind of in the back of my mind trying to figure out what this house represents, what they stand for. What are the quality of the ingredients? What are the pricing? What are they shooting for? What category would I place the house in? Because if you follow me, you know that I kind of go everywhere. I'm probably different than many fragrance reviewers. I would probably say that my taste more aligns somewhat closer to maybe someone like Mark from the Robes OH channel, in that you'll see him review everything. You'll see him review designers, niche, vintage. He's not afraid to talk about stuff that goes against the grain, if you will, but a lot of what he focuses on are stuff like Tom Ford and designers, and whereas I'll even go into the ouds and stuff like that, and Aries Ladore and Bortnikov, which you almost never hear him talk about. And so this brand, I would say, is a proper niche brand, and it's an Italian niche brand, and it's called Moresque. And the name of the fragrance is Emiro. And Emiro is actually from their black collection. They have multiple collections, one white, one black. This one's from the black collection. And I'll read you a little interesting fact blurb about the house before we get into this fragrance. And so here's basically an interesting facts from Parfumo on the house. It says, the skillful balancing act between the Oriental aura and the high Italian art of perfumery is an essential part of Moresque's philosophy. Behind the brand is Cindy Guillemont, a young Italian woman who originally wanted to earn her money in business. That's why she majored in international business in the USA and then gained her first practical experience in Western Europe metropolises. However, Guillemont grew up with her grandmother, who was familiar with fragrance production, ingredients, and recipes. So, two hearts were beating in her chest, and Guillemont decided to enter the world of fragrances. Well, it'd be nice to have two hearts. Thus, in 2014, the Milan-based brand Moresque was born. From the beginning, the businesswoman, together with perfumer Andre Casati, who I've never heard of, tried to establish a new way of creating. She wanted to combine Moresque with the unique flavors of the Orient and a touch of Italian lightness. In addition, they wanted to draw on centuries-old processes and methods in the art of manufacturing in Italy. The Moorish scents and aromas are interpreted in a completely new way. The perfumes and scented candles from the hands of Cindy Guillemont are divided into white, black, and art, and appeal to different preferences. This can also be seen in the deliberately simple flacons, which bring a touch of luxury and elegance. Moresque is fully aware of its quality and does not need to draw attention to itself with flashy colors or fancy designs. Okay, so that's a quick little blurb on the brand, if you will. First time I've ever smelled a Moresque fragrance, and we'll talk a little bit about pricing, but before we get into this fragrance, Emiro, it was released in 2015. It's classified as a floral resinous fragrance by Parfumo, which I sort of agree with, sort of don't agree with. But we can't talk about this fragrance without talking about a fragrance that came out in 2011. So Emiro came out in 2015, and in 2011, there was actually a Roja Dove fragrance that came out, and it was called Roja's Oud. That's how he writes oud, A-O-U-D, because he says he's lived amongst the people for 3 years and understands their practices, and they say Aoud. I don't know. Or that's how it sounds when they say it in the Middle East. I don't know. I've never heard a Middle Easterner say Aoud, but that's how he writes it to try to differentiate himself. But if you've smelled Roja's Oud, which I have yet to do a full review on, although it can't be much different than this because this is a flashbulb of similarity. I mean, when I smelled this for the very first time, oh, and before we go any further, I would be completely remiss if I didn't say thank you to Armando, my fragrance brother in the United States, who has sent me some of these beautiful samples to get to know houses and fragrances and names and, everything from vintage to niche to stuff I've never smelled before. And he has just hit the nail on the head as far as finding my taste, finding things I like. Everything he sent me has been at least a like. I've really enjoyed exploring some of the things he sent me. So thank you, Armando, and very generous 5 ml decants, more than enough for me to wear multiple times and get to know it and talk about it. So thank you again, seriously, a big thank you. You have made this channel much better. You're an official friend of the channel. And so this Emiro, you just cannot talk about without talking about Roja's Oud from 2011. And look at the color of Roja's Oud. Now they've since, that's actually one of the things I don't like about this fragrance, is it has stained my clothes before. Even when I've tried to kind of spray it on, let's say, my neck, because this sprayer isn't the best, it'll kind of dribble, and it got my shirt once. They do, and I know Roja would say, well, we offer a special Presso fragrance that removes the colored ingredients and whatever. But the one that I have, and the official sample that I have, which I had to compare because I had a friend who I really trust, so I have no doubt this is authentic, but this is decanted from a bottle. And so I got an official carded, or an official Roja Dove sample, which comes in the shittiest little sample atomizers. A brand like Roja should have better than, you know, the same thing Bulgari and you know, Mont Blanc use, but whatever. That's a different topic for a different day. Don't get me started on sample atomizers, because we'll be here for hours. So Roja's Oud, and these two are basically the same. I've done a comparison. No difference from what I got from my buddy and the sample. The official Roja sample is just a flashbulb of similarity. I mean, when I first smelled this, I was like, this is a clone. This is 100% a clone. There's no way I mean, even the subtle differences are kind of tough to pick out. They both share this same symphonic-like rose smell with oud and touches of leather, although one difference between the two just right off of the bat, I'll tell you because I'll probably forget to tell you if I don't tell you now, is in the dry down of Emiro, it starts to go more ambery than in the dry down of just Roja's Oud. And that's why I think some people that I kind of read some reviews on compare Emiro more to Roja's Amber Oud, which came out I think a year later in 2012. So this is a decade old. And Amber Oud, which I have a review on. You can go check this out. I did that review about 11 months ago. And the FedEx guy is here right now dropping off a package. Let's see if I have to sign for it, because if I have to sign, you guys are just going to have to wait while I sign for this bad boy. I think we're safe. I think he's just going to drop it off. So yes, I did a early impression, or, you know, I wore this as my scent of the day and did an early impression video on Amber Oud. You can go check out my thoughts, but Emiro does go a little bit more ambery than I think Roja's Oud goes, but you only catch that after the first 4 or 5 hours. The first 4 or 5 hours are just like a flashbulb of similarity between Roja's Oud and Emiro from the Black Collection from Moresque, which again is a brand I know nothing about, so this is all new to me. So immediately, what's the first thing you're going to say? Well, if Roja's Oud is, you know, if Roja's Oud is very similar to Emiro's, or Moresque's Emiro, is there a big price difference? And so I looked it up, and basically, since it's almost an exact replica of Roja's Oud, the price is the first thing most people are going to want to know about. And so this Roja's Oud for 100 ml is 595 pounds. They're proud of their scents over at Roja's Parfums for 100 ml. And now that's retail, so of course you can maybe find it a little bit discounted, but that basically works out to $726 at today's current exchange rate to dollars. Monday, January 9th, $726 exchange rate right now for 100 mils of Roja's Oud at retail. They are very proud. So I figured this is going to be much cheaper, right? I mean, came out years later. Moresque is definitely not a brand like Roja. I've never even heard of Moresque before. I've never heard of anyone hype them or talk about how great they are or anything like that. I don't see videos about them on YouTube, which I actually did look up the videos on YouTube. We'll get to that later on this one. But, so I figured, okay. And at first I saw the price. I saw 250 pounds. I was like, shit, that's actually not bad. But guess what? That's for 50 mil. So they cut the amount of juice in half. If you want 100 mil, obviously that's 500 pounds, which works out to about $610. So you save a whopping, you know, mil per mil comparison. you're only saving about $116. Not that big of a difference. But you know what? Both of these fragrances smell expensive to me. They smell like you're getting that high class, niche, expensive rose oud blob, if you will, that these houses nowadays try to sell this luxury smell. And these both have it, I will tell you that. So, so they both have it, but the price savings is not what you would expect, okay? So I had to kind of look into the House of Moresque a little bit, and the notes according to the brand, and if you'll notice, they're always very specific about where they say each ingredient comes from. So the notes according to the brand are lemon from Amalfi, can't just have regular lemon, bergamot from Calabria, Bulgarian rose, Caribbean ylang ylang, if you prefer, jasmine sambac, geranium pantelleria, patchouli from Indonesia, which is where like 90+% of the patchouli comes from. So that sounds fancy, but it's really not. Oud, leather, and amber. Those are the official note listing from the brands. And here's how it is described by the brand. It says Emiro is the olfactory tribute to the emirs, to the monarchs and those in command, because they need, of course, a tribute. The people who are in command need Moresque to give a tribute, of course. A scent of royalty, power, and freedom and prestige that conveys a sense of conquest and perfection. Fleeting citrusy, elegant, and light fruity notes lead to a rich floral garden guarded by geranium pantelleria, a soft and delicate heart fortified by the deepness of oud, exhilarated by the pungent and exciting leather, comforted by the warmth of amber. This floral perfume unleashes sensual accords supported by contemporary and exotic patchouli from Indonesia. They try to make it seem exotic. It's not. It's just patchouli. So here is how I would describe this, okay? So this is a very tough one for me to describe, actually, and that's the reason I have not talked about Roja's Oud yet either, because this blend is very tough for me to describe. But what I ended up settling on today is that this is a perfumer's perfume. And what I mean by it's a perfumer's perfume is that when I really try and dig into the smell, the ingredients, the blend, how it's mixed, what's forward, what's kind of in the rear view mirror, the rose kind of seems more geranium than rose, which gives it some of that lemony quality. That's another big difference with the Roja, I think. Big difference is overstated. It's another slight difference that you can pick up. These scents are very, very, very close. And so the geranium comes across as maybe slightly a little bit more lemony from memory than what you get from the Roja. I want to save this juice because I want to do my own video on Roja's Oud one day. I don't want to waste it all doing a comparison. But from memory, Emiro from Moresque seems a little bit more lemony in that floral makeup, which I like because it reminds me of one of my favorite flowers, which is Taif rose. This is not Taif rose. This is Bulgarian rose that they've used, which can sometimes come across a little bit more fruity and jammy. So the floral heart carries this extra lemoniness from the geranium, and maybe the other thing that I kind of thought about while I was thinking about that extra lemoniness is maybe that the lemon and bergamot from the top are more than just fleeting, as the brand describes, and maybe they do actually last deeper into the dry down than what you get with Roja's Oud. But when I say this is a perfumer's perfume, I do mean that in a positive way. I'm not taking a shot at the fragrance because I actually do like this composition. The rose has that jammy aspect that you'll find from like rose aroma chemicals, not the natural rose Otto. So I've talked about this many times on the channel before. If you're new to the channel, you probably haven't heard me, say this yet, but Russian Adam was very kind enough to send me some real rose Ottos, and if you go watch our interviews with Russian Adam and I, we actually went material by material and smelled, Bulgarian rose, Russian rose, Iran rose, you know, and what the differences are. Damask rose and all this different stuff, Taif rose, and we went through one by one and smelled them all. Those rose attos, those actual rose oils, none of them had this jammy aspect to it. And I came to the conclusion that that jammy aspect of rose is some aroma chemical that, you know, it's not the real rose smell, if that makes sense, which there's nothing wrong with that. You know, some people get so caught up in real versus fake that they kind of lose sight of what they like. Even though this doesn't smell like real rose to me, what I smelled in the actual attos, I still like the blend and the creation, and I completely understand where the perfume is going, and that's important to me. And that's why I say it's a perfumer's perfume. The perfumer did a great job blending these aroma chemicals in a way where I'm a fan, okay? If you're just coming in here, you could make a negative case and say, well, this doesn't smell like real Bulgarian rose. It doesn't smell like real oud, but we'll get to that here in a minute. And I usually don't like to admit, one thing I kind of had to come around and just admit to myself on this fragrance is that it did kind of leave me confused. I didn't understand I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the composition. Usually I can pretty easily see the composition and, you know, top, middle, you know, top, heart, base, or whatever you want the triangle, the perfume triangle to be, and the citrusy notes of, you know, evaporate quicker. Here, the, you know, whole composition kind of befuddled me a little bit. I was a little confused because it felt like the citruses kind of lasted much longer than you would expect them to. And when I'm reading the note listing, what I smell, what left me confused is this. So what left me confused mostly, especially today, really wearing this as my scent of the day for the first time, what left me confused is not necessarily what I smell in Emiro, but what I thought I smelled in Roja's Oud, because I thought I kind of started to wrap my head around Roja's Oud. And if you take a look at Roja's Oud, if you go to Roja Parfums, rojaparfums.com, and go to his original oud, he listed as the original oud. Launched in 2011, and they go through the usual Roja. Oh, it was such an instant sellout. We had to manually carry bottles one by one into the store because the demand was so high and all that shit that Roja does, right? But if you take a look, they actually highlight what they call key ingredients in the composition. And they highlight 3. I bet you can guess 2, rose and oud, because this is a rose oud. But the third one, which I get in a huge way in both compositions, Roja lists saffron, okay? Now, I did an entire video on saffron. I actually have some of the good stuff right here. I've got the actual Spanish saffron. This is kind of cool to sniff if you want to get to know ingredients. Just buy some. You know, it's from Costco, 28 bucks or something. And, you know, saffron to me is a big note in this. Huge. It's what I thought was a huge note in this. So it was a very big surprise to me to see saffron just totally missing from the official note tree according to Moresque. Just gone. Not even there. Not even mentioned. Saffron usually adds this thick, syrupy, honeyed, like hay-like smell. It's like a hay-like honey, if that makes sense. But saffron also has this characteristic of giving this slight chemical vibe that can approach bleach. So if I smell this saffron right here, it almost has this slight chemical vibe, okay? It doesn't get to bleach, but imagine if you're smelling a chemical that approaches bleach, right? When saffron is really dosed. It also has this, and one of the reasons why I'm convinced that saffron is in both, and Moresque just kind of left it out, is, so my conclusions are they just didn't want to list it because they wanted to be different. They didn't want people who knew fragrances, because the first time I smelled this with knowing nothing about the brand, when I read this Moresque Emiro, This meant nothing to me. I knew nothing of the brand. Zilch. Zero. And as soon as I sprayed it, I was like, holy shit, Roja's Oud. Like, not even a doubt. There is no other fragrance on earth that's closer to this than Roja's Oud. So maybe they were thinking, we'll throw them off the trail. We'll leave the saffron out. So they can't just say we kind of copied Roja, which they probably clearly took inspiration. Although it is funny, Roja now being the one being copied, the shoe is on the other foot. But the other thing that could be happening is that the amber is just so amped up in this Moresque Emiro that it gives the impression of saffron, but I don't think so, because saffron has this specific quality to me. Anytime it's amped up, I'll show you another fragrance where I think saffron is extremely amped up, and that is Maison Francis Kurkdjian's Oud, the original Eau de Parfum, not the extrait, the Eau de Parfum, okay? Oh my God, it's a huge saffron bomb. And, you know, of course, with that Oud chemical molecule, whatever it is, whatever the chemical molecule they're using on for Oud is, norlimbinol or whatever. They each have their own, each house has their own. But saffron has this quality in all of them. In Roja's Oud, in Emiro by Moresque, in Maison Francis Kurkdjian's Oud from 2012 or whatever it was, the Eau de Parfum. Saffron has this quality of basically having this pudding-like texture. And I don't necessarily just mean pudding-like texture in, like if you put pudding in your mouth, but I mean pudding-like texture because it's thick and gloopy and it fills in the holes, right? So imagine you have like two plastic containers, right? And one carries like, I don't know, pistachios, or if you have a toddler like I do, goldfish, right? And there's space in between the pistachios or the goldfish, right? But if you take that same container and you put pudding or yogurt or something like that in there, it has volume, right? It takes up space, and it does that by volume. That's the feel that saffron gives in a composition. And it's unmistakable here. I don't know of any other ingredient that can give it this hay-like, honeyed volume. When you mix it with the rose and the oud, it gives off a very distinct profile, extremely distinct. And I think there's maybe some aroma chemical that one of the houses selling that just gives it this Roja's Oud feel that Roja used, that obviously Moresque is using. And maybe it's not cheap, and maybe that's why you don't smell it over and over and over. I have not smelled this DNA since, or, you know, I haven't smelled this DNA since uncovering Roja's Oud many years ago. And so it adds this fattiness to a fragrance. That's a good way to describe it. It adds this fattiness to it. The fragrance does not seem thin. It seems fatty. And that's how you want your Middle Eastern rose oud fragrances to be. I mean, you don't want a thin, kind of weak, you know, you want your Middle Eastern Oriental rose ouds to have some, you know, gusto, to have some punch, right? And saffron adds that. To me, it does. So that's kind of the journey. It's nothing insane. Some downsides you could add to, some downsides you could maybe complain about in this perfume are, number one, the rose doesn't necessarily smell realistic, but it's a beautiful rose. And there's no denying it's a rose accord. How it's created, I don't know, but my guess is that it's created with a lot of modern day aroma chemicals that project like hell. This fragrance projects like no other. This is a huge perfume, as is Roja's Oud to me. To me, I think this is a very distinct smell. People will definitely smell it on you. Even if you're like me and you don't spray your clothes, you just spray your skin, you know, you spray your collarbone or your back of your neck or whatever, and your arms or wrists, people will smell this. And, you know, for me though, I think about, would I buy this? Would I give Moresque 250 pounds, which is a lot of dollars, you know, over 300 bucks, for 50 mils? Hell no, absolutely not. Would I spend 50 or 100 bucks on a partial? Maybe, because I like the DNA, but do I like it enough to, want a full bottle when I still have my decant that I'm working off of? I don't know. I really don't. I'm going to do a full review on this. And the thing is I don't know if it's going to be any different than what I'm saying now. I mean, the fragrances are so close. But there's one, for me personally, there's one overriding issue that maybe I'm the only person that has this, that tilts it in favor of Moresque's Emiro. For me, one. And that's that anytime I spray Roja's Oud, and as you can see, I've given it full wears, lots of full wears. This is a pretty good sized decant, and I put a good dent in it. Every single time that I have sprayed this, every time, without fail, I get a headache. Without fail, every time. This thing gives me a headache. And I didn't get it from Amber Oud, luckily. I didn't get it from Musk Oud, but I hated Musk Oud by Roja. Amber Oud is the only one that I really like that I would, if I had to buy a bottle, maybe it would be Amber Oud. I don't know. I probably wouldn't buy one anyways. But this, I've been wearing it all day. No headache. None at all. In fact, it has this beguiling aspect to it where you want to just continue to smell it. And it smells like there's some sort of, I would bet, there's some sort of ambergris in here that's also not listed. So I think Moresque is playing a little bit coy. I think they're trying to be the cool kid on the block, trying to act like the note listing is a little different than Roja. There's no saffron, which I think there's a huge saffron note. And I think they've added a little bit of real ambergris in here to give it a little bit of that sparkle. It has a little bit of that, it has a little bit of this pizzazz, if you will, that just keeps you coming back. I've been smelling it all day. I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying wearing it. I don't know if I would buy a bottle, though. Probably not. But it's very interesting. What's interesting to me is there's entire houses like this. This just goes to show that the perfume abounds for perfume lovers. I mean, there is so much fragrance out there. There's so many fragrance houses. It seems like every day there's a new house or two popping up. And when they pop up, guess what? They don't just release one fragrance. No, they release 10, 8, 7, 10, 15 fragrances at once, all at the same time. Like this Moresque house, they must have popped up somewhere in 2015, because in 2015, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when they release their brand, 6, 7, 8. They released with 8 fragrances, okay, is what it looks like. And then same in 2016, it feels like they've got another 5 fragrances. Same for 2017, another 5. So, these houses, they just pop up out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they have 136 perfumes like that. And it's like, Jesus, I mean, it's impossible to keep up, even for someone who lives and breathes and loves the art of perfumery. It's so hard to keep up. Well, I was trying to think about what would give me that headache quality in Roja's Oud that's not in or not listed in Moresque's Emiro. And I focused in on the cashmeran because Roja loves using cashmere wood. It's actually listed as, anytime you see cashmere wood, just know that's code word for cashmeran. But on Roja's website, interestingly enough, he lists Casmere wood, C-A-S-M-I-R. I don't know if that's a spelling mistake or some ingredient I've never heard of, but I'm assuming it's cashmeran. And cashmeran has this velvety, musky, slightly earthy, wet type quality to it. And I don't see any lists of cashmeran in Moresque. There's also some other things in Roja's Oud that are not listed here. For example, the jasmine comes from Grasse. It's not jasmine wherever Moresque said this one was from. Jasmine, what did I say? Now I'm not going to be able to find it. jasmine sambac. So it's jasmine from grass. You know, there's some slight differences here and there, but that's for the real connoisseurs that want to dig into this, who love this scent that much that they really want to kind of dive into the difference. There's also a little bit of lemon verbena in the top of Roja's Oud that's not listed in, you know, Moresque's Emiro. So there's some small stuff like that, but all in all, the scent is almost identical for the first 4 hours. So it is something that I was not expecting. I was not expecting this almost 1-for-1 clone, but you know what? I've enjoyed it. I think I actually prefer the Moresque's Emiro because of that non-headache inducing quality, which even though I like Roja's Oud, it feels like every time I spray it, I get a headache. So for me personally, that would give the slight advantage to Moresque Emiro. But I would love to know if anyone else has any experience with the House of Moresque. I never hear anyone talk about them. I looked them up. There were 2 videos on YouTube. One was Kuba Knows, which I watched the first minute of that, and I was like, can't watch that anymore. No offense to him, it's just not my style. And then the second one was Juan from Huela Mamucho, which I can watch Juan's videos. And I watched it, and, you know, he was like, oh, this is a regal scent, and if you want to smell like a king, and, yeah, you know. But there weren't very many details about the scent, and I completely understand why. This is a very hard scent to break down. Very hard. Because it seems like you're just smelling a rose oud, but there's so much more going on. And I think that saffron really surprises people the way it's used with the amber, and that leather note is almost an afterthought. I don't get very much leather, but this is a 6-hour dry down, and I do get this ambery, maybe just a hint of leather if you really focused on it, but mostly ambery base that the bulk of the fragrance is the first 4 or 5 hours to me, and that's where they really smell the same anyways. So that's kind of my take. I think in 2011 when Roja's Oud came out, you have to remember that it was the Rose Oud craze. Everyone that was anyone had a Rose Oud fragrance, you know? And so it was the hip thing to do. People were spending tons of money on it. But now, in 2023, we have Bortnikov, we have Arige Ladore, we have Ensar Oud, we have, you know, even houses like Peter Carter's Centuri Parfums using real oud. We have, you know, just all of these brands. Meleg uses real oud. So it's very tough to justify these prices for something that seems like a trend a decade ago. Now, I don't think the oud trend will ever go away, but I think the oud that we're getting in these extremely expensive, you know, niche houses or whatever are maybe a little past its expiration date. I think people who are into this may be more interested in sniffing and smelling Bortnikov or something like that, where you're getting the actual, it feels like you're getting the real oud accord. So that's my take on it. I like it. I enjoy it. I've enjoyed wearing it today, and I will wear it again because Armando gave me enough juice to do so. But this is probably not something I would go for a full bottle for, but I would love to hear your thoughts. If anyone has opinions on the House of Moresque, if you've smelled Emiro before, if you have opinions on the Rose Oud trend, you know, my whole theory about saffron being in here, anything like that, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I love your comments. I know that these individual reviews don't get the views and everything of lists and all that stuff, but I don't care because this is not a job for me. This is a hobby. And so it's not like I am running my channel to feed my family. And so because of that, I can go again. I don't have to go for clicks and ad revenue. I can just do whatever I want. And I like doing these individual reviews sometimes because I think they're very important still to do. But I do love the interaction with you guys, even though, you know, I know that these videos won't get the views of the lists and all that stuff. It's important for me to do. So that's my thought. Thank you, Armando, for sending this. Broadening my horizons, always a pleasure. I'll make an entire playlist for Moresque, so if we ever do more, we can add it to the playlist. And cheers, everybody. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again later with another video. Bye-bye.